Oh, well, a little bit of a heads up would have been a little countdown or something. Are we on? No, come back to camera. What is this, 3? There we go. All right. Hey, everybody. It's the Art Sign. A little bit of a clunky start today, but that's okay. That's, it's kind of how the narrative of this show. I'm Johnny Torres. Welcome to the Art Sign, everybody, as we do every Monday night, 7 o'clock here on Facebook, YouTube, now available on Apple Podcasts as well. We're also streaming live on Periscope via Twitter. So, man, the show just keeps growing and growing. Thanks to everybody for watching. We really appreciate you. And, again, you're the reason we're doing this. So we're going to be bringing you a rundown of national, state, and Florida politics. And, again, thankful to Chris Licata, who's going to be running the show today behind the scenes so I could sit on this side of the camera. Always nice when we can do that. Let's go over to the table to see who's joining me for today. The usual cast of characters for the most part. Of course, this lovely gentleman right here is looking very religious, very kind of holy, you have a very clean aura about you today.
Well, I'm present company.
No, look, let's realize here who did not get the memo about dressing up today, okay?
You guys just are a little underdressed most of the episodes.
Guys,
oh,
I
man,
came from,
wow.
Participating in MLK Parade.
Yeah, the guy who was in a t-shirt in last episode.
And the V-necks were getting really
every once
uncomfortable.
In a while. We'll be back to V-necks next week.
This was an accident.
All right.
This was an accident.
This was an accident.
And this guy who plays a Ralph Lauren model on the weekends is Jake Hoffman. What's up, man?
How's it going?
Doing good. You look good. You look sharp.
I appreciate it.
You look like you care about the show today.
Today. Oh, it's all for the show.
A broken clock is right at least twice.
I know. Now I feel like I'm the one denigrating the show here by not being dressed up. And, of course, setting the standard over here is Chris VerKuilen. Did I pronounce it right? Close.
VerKuilen. Close
Damn
enough.
it. All right. Well, Chris is joining us again for his second show. Thank you so much for being here, man.
Thanks for having me back. And for anyone watching, we are hiring a producer. We have a position.
Wow. Yeah. Someone's mic's going to get
Shots
cut.
are already being fired.
All right. So let's go back over to 3 real quick, and let's pull up our list of topics for today. Of course, never a dull moment, as you might imagine. If you haven't checked your Facebook feed yet, plenty to talk about. Let's see. Chris, if you don't mind bringing up the list of topics there, please. We're going to go ahead and start. Trump impeachment. Not a whole lot going on there, but nonetheless, it's a slow-moving process in a very deliberate way. And I think that's, of course, by design, at least on the Democrat side. The Dem Primary Debate. I think there was more action, off camera than there was on camera. So we'll talk about that. The trade deals that went down, of course, the media not showing a lot of love to Trump, but some major trade deals went down between China and Japan. We'll deconstruct those. Puerto Rico, a mess, as always. And I'm not just talking about the random, just wrath of earthquakes that they've experienced. We'll talk about what's going on over there. Virginia had a major rally today about the Second Amendment. We'll talk about that, and may something like that be coming to Florida as well. We'll give a little speculation on that front. Talk a little bit about Florida politics and how Hillsborough County is going to be affected by this year's session. And, of course, Martin Luther King Day, which, we can't recognize enough for his contributions. And obviously, always strive to live up to his vision for this country. All right. So getting started with the Trump impeachment. Again, not a whole lot going on other than the papers, being walked over to the Senate. I think it was the Washington Post finally came out, or one of the New York publications. Somebody came out saying that that now there's a conspiracy theory being peddled that Nancy Pelosi is kind of somehow intentionally slowing this down and trying to affect the primary.
Yeah, I think we talked about this a little bit on the last show, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about how, what I said was that I think that she probably, again, has had a long-term relationship with Joe Biden, right? They've both been in Congress and Senate together for, 50, 60 years, it feels like at this point. So when you have that, you probably have friendships in alliances within Washington, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's playing favorites a little bit. I mean, it would be right up the DNC's alley, right, to pick the winner of their primary.
Sure.
I mean, I'm not surprised.
Well, and being that they got caught so red-handed last time, they got to be a little more coy about it. But every little bit of an advantage that you can give Biden, I think they're going to capitalize on it.
For some reason, I was of the opinion in that same thread. However, seeing the ramp up that was needed for the pomp and circumstance that occurred last week with the Darth Vader walk across Congress to the Senate, and everyone dressed in the same outfit except for the one congressional woman in white holding the piece of paper like if it was, I don't know,
the Constitution.
Yes, like
some
it was
kind of biblical passage.
It was
the original copy.
It was so annoying to see how much, and then how long does it take to get like custom pens?
That is really the story here, guys. That is the story. The fact that she had custom pens made. I mean,
it was horrible.
It's like it just looks so bad when you look back a couple weeks ago when she's like praying for him and
all
like
sad, all in black with her Darth Vader pin.
It's fake. I mean, right? It's always been political theater. It just even shows more to the political theater that it's been already, that you're gonna have pens made. Like, come on, what is this?
Well, remember, she was waiting for Bill Maher to get back on the TV so then she could make the announcement. Like, this is all planned. She was waiting for him to get back on air so then she could make a TV announcement that he's now impeached and impeached forever. Just the joy in her face. And again, the Botox is definitely not working anymore.
It's been more
if
than
she's being able to see it.
times that she's had to quash the pleasure that she's derived, when the camera turns on to her. It's not the first time. It isn't the second time. It isn't the third time. The whole thing when she was handing over the articles and having to wave them to silence the caucus in the House, and had to mute the smirk on her own face, to save face after she was talking about how somber and sober the moment was.
Well, but then you got to go and get the commemorative pins, right?
Commemorative pins.
Like, how much are they going on eBay? I want to know that now. Like,
well, then you come to the late night infomercials where you get the commemorative plate.
Have you guys seen the Trumpy bear though that they're selling? Have you guys seen that? It's a bear with. It's like a stuffed bear that you take home with you. It's got Trump's hair and everything. Like, that's a great commemorative thing. They're selling it on like Fox News late at night.
That infomercial is like a caricature of conservatives.
Oh yeah, it's great. It's great.
But again, this shows and then also we got to actually see who the Democrats are putting up for their lawyers that will be representing them, the managers that will be representing them in the Senate, and then you have now the Republicans putting who will be on there, and we know a lot of people on that little group of lawyers that will now be Pam Bondi, a great representative of Florida, as AG, a great AG of Florida. Pam Bondi, she's going to do a great job and is already on the news, making the rounds on the news to showcase what's happening. I think Ken Starr is on that list also, which is insane that they brought him out of the creep to be able to get him back into play. But it seems that the way they're going to argue the two articles now are just on the substance of the law and the fact that this does not meet any kind of barrier of high crime or treason, right? Which would require impeachment.
These are all procedural.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so to allow this to go forward, you're opening the floodgates. That now that if anyone has disagreement with the executive, if the legislative doesn't agree with them, then they can file articles of impeachment, which is what they need to. This has to be kiboshed, and if it doesn't, it's going to cause a huge problem.
Okay, so then that's the question. Does the Senate push this through, rush this through, just to be done and over with, because we know what's going to happen in the Senate, or do they drag this out basically because Republicans maybe potentially believe that this is somehow playing in their favor?
I think that they are going to make it appear like a fair trial, right? I mean, again, I think that if we all know that it's not going to pass, right, it's not really like a fair trial, right? That's what Democrats are going to argue, and I would probably say that's pretty right? That's how politics works. We know that it's not going to go all the way through, but I think that they want to have the appearance that he was given a fair shake in the Senate, and they didn't just immediately throw this out to the side when it comes in.
At the end of the day, the Democrats are asking for witnesses, witnesses that should have been called when it was when the ball was in the House's court. If they didn't allow, they wanted it rushed, had to get done before Christmas, had to all get done. Well, you could have easily had who was the ambassador for
Marie Yovanovitch.
She already did the testimony.
For the Ukraine.
But they're trying to get additional ambassadors, trying to get additional Trump support, Trump administrative people that were in the White House at the time to testify. And those all could have been done before Christmas.
Well, the clear sign is what a lot of Republicans have said is that they are already trying to discredit what's going to happen on the Senate side, meaning that it didn't have that strong a case going into it to begin with. And now by discrediting it ahead of time is going to make it look like, Republicans have somehow diminished the importance of this, when again, in reality, it has no legs to begin with.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're talking about two charges here that actually have no basis in law. These are not actual laws in our books and our legislation as they stand. But I think this has some utility for Republicans because you can call Hunter Biden and Joe Biden to the stand. This has potential to be very, very valuable for us.
Yeah, I just don't think that we're going to get any of the things that people want to see, right? Like, we're not going to get them to testify. I don't think the Democrats aren't going to get, Pompeo or these other guys that are high up in the Trump campaign that are going to be able to come over the stand. Like, they're not going to do any of that kind of stuff. And again, I think it's going to kind of fizzle out and be a lot less exciting than anybody wants it to be.
I think that might be what the Republicans want it to happen. That it needs to. There cannot be a show. It's not the Truman Show. It cannot get crazy. Well, the moment it gets crazy, the Republicans lose the narrative. It needs to be that. I'm sorry. It needs to be that the Republicans are the parents in this situation, and that we're going to deal with this. We're going to get it quashed. You don't want our witnesses. We don't want your witnesses, which means that no one's going to vote in either way. Now they're always saying that they just need 4 Republicans to switch to vote for witnesses. However, the way it's going to be thrown in is that you get your 4 witnesses, we get our 4 witnesses. We'll vote at one time. If they try to piecemeal it, Republicans will lose every single time, because we all know the 4 Republicans that we're already thinking about that probably will. It's Romney, it's Maine, it's Alaska. These senators that keep on showing that they might be willing to listen to witnesses. But those witnesses, we will never get what we want. Democrats never let us get what we want if we're also going to let them get what they want. If we want, the only way it'll happen is if they vote all at the same time.
Look, really, at the end of the day, the only thing that matters here, and because we know what their intentions were with the impeachment to begin with, which was to sway public opinion in regards to the election. And so if my opinion is, if they drag this too long, which may play in Republicans' favor, people are going to lose interest. They're going to forget about it.
Well, I mean, if you look at the polling, right? I mean, again, since the beginning of impeachment, it was pretty close to a little bit above 50% of the country was for impeachment, right? And then as the process has dragged on and gone longer and longer and longer, it's less and less, right? I mean, like you're watching a chart crisscross all of a sudden where it's like, people are no longer in favor for impeachment. They're watching the process. They're seeing all this stuff happen, and then all of a sudden they're like, you know what? Maybe it wasn't so bad. Nothing's coming out. We thought there was going to be this big bombshell. Same thing that happened during the Russia investigation. And none of these big bombshells ever happened. So people are like, okay, now why is it being dragged? If it's so important, why are you dragging it on, right? If it's so important, then why haven't you just walked over and given the papers? So none of those things are happening, and then people are just kind of like, again, they're like, oh, maybe you shouldn't get impeached, and all of a sudden it's changing directions.
Well, an interesting angle too was what Anibal said earlier, which I'd never even thought about, which is her literally waiting, through the holiday kind of, lull in television, right, for some of these programs to come back to give her an opportunity to go on there in prime time and actually get people's attention.
Of course.
The thing is, though, she completely forgot that Gasparilla season's here. No one in Tampa is worrying about impeachment.
If you didn't go back and watch our beads conversation from last week, that's probably the best section we've done on the show since the beginning of the show. I would highly suggest going back and seeing last week's episode.
And who knew you loved talking about beads so much?
I would have never guessed.
We are not moving back into
We're
that.
not moving back into that conversation.
No, look, really quickly on that topic.
Yeah.
On Gasparilla in general.
Oh.
No. Just Gasparilla in general. I took my daughter and I went with the entire family, niece, nephew, all that. First time going to the children's festivals, children's parade. Yeah. It was a great time.
I can't say I've been.
Shout out to the Rough Riders, who we have a lot of friends on. Yes, all of them were sober. Shout out to the school board. I got to see our friends Melissa Snively, Steve Kona on the float. Who very targetedly got me some beads as well. So shout out for the good arms on those two. No, it was a blast, and my family had never gone to it before because they're not from here. They just moved up here, and if you haven't been, it really is a cool event.
I'm telling you, no one in the region is thinking about impeachment at the moment. We're just trying to survive through
the rest of this
season.
week.
This week,
get through the rest of the week. Get to Saturday. let's have a great Saturday.
Right,
That's
right.
all I'm saying.
Maybe we'll
All right.
have some new things to look at when Gasparilla is finished. You guys want to
Maybe.
do Left Parnas?
Well, Gasparilla now is like a month and a half. So it's like,
Guys, we ran through the schedule. It's 2 months, but we're not talking about this right now. So we're going to
Oh
keep
my
on. I
God.
will say this. So what's happening with impeachment now that the senators, because again, I love,
You're not on camera.
I don't
You know,
care.
but thanks.
I keep on talking, but it is what it is. I'm not, again, we just said we were looking for a producer.
Oh.
So,
Oh.
I will say this. Going off on the idea of Nancy loving Joe Biden's idea is very, I mean, it plays into the fact that we're 2.5 weeks away
Right.
from Iowa. The polls are showing that's crazy right now. And now you're taking all 4 senators out. Well, if we'll have 4 senators left in the race. By
I mean,
then,
they'll
'cause
make it there.
Everyone's dropping like flies now.
But they're not going to be able to have the impact that they would normally
nowhere
have.
near. Because they have to be there for, I did not know it was 6 days a week. It's Monday through Saturday that the Senate will be in session.
Yeah.
So they're sitting there not talking and not being able to be on a mic, which I would assume is torture for Cory Booker and for some of these other ones.
Yeah.
Well, Booker's
that
home
want-
now.
That
Like,
want their moment in the sun, and because they can't get it in Iowa, they can't go there now. So I love what's happening. I will say though, it makes it look now again like the establishment is already trying to pick its winner and is trying to manipulate the system.
Well, I mean, if you look into some of the research being done on the Democratic primary and everything, and I guess we can start sliding ourselves into the Democratic primary as we do every single week. It seems like. The people who
is that a transition?
that was a really good transition.
That was a smooth
I was
one.
just going to let him finish it.
You guys never let me
I
finish.
was
You
never
said
going
that.
to let him finish.
You ruined it.
They ruin all my really good ones. My hard lefts.
Oh no, we let him dig himself into the grave.
Anyway, so if you look into what's going on in the Democratic primary, all of the people who are in the Bernie camp and the Warren camp, they're really, really, as kind of expected, dug into their camp so hard that if those two are not the winners within the first few states, you're going to see this massive drop-off of enthusiasm for the rest of the candidates. And I think that everyone's really worried about that on the Democratic side. Like, they're really worried that the young people are like us on their side are no longer going to start walking for, Biden's or anybody like that.
That's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
So
Well, and do you think one of these people are kind of trailing towards the back? So Yang, Gabbard, Steyer, Steyer's
Not so much
trying
Steyer.
to buy. He's trying to buy the primary. But some of these candidates who are towards the end, of the list. Do you think any of them are going to usurp the front runners, or is that just too difficult at this point?
I would be really surprised. I'd be really surprised if anybody took out the top 3. I think that, again, I wouldn't be.
Who are your top 3?
I wouldn't be surprised if Bernie wins a nomination. I wouldn't be too surprised if Biden wins a nomination, and I think Elizabeth Warren is going to win the nomination. Those are my. I still think. I don't think anything changes. I do. And again, we're gonna tally these all up all times I've said that on this show, and then when she ends up winning, we can come back and add it to the.
Loses,
add it to the.
Take shots on all of these things.
Add it to the chalkboard of all the things I've been writing about on the show,
which is very little.
It's a huge chalkboard. So anyway,
very little.
Well, you know what? I don't think I've made the prediction.
Big, but yes, very little.
I don't think I've made the prediction, so I'm going to go way off course, and I'll say that none of the three front runners will be the nominee.
You don't think so? You think that one of these guys are going to come out from nowhere from Iowa?
I think it's going to be anybody that right now that's under Biden, Warren, and Sanders.
So who do you if you had to pick one?
I know I would have to agree on that one.
Do you think that any of them?
Well, personally, I would hope it would be again someone like Gabbard. I think would make for a really interesting election. But you know what? I at the end of the day, I think Buttigieg might pull it out.
What?
Yeah,
he has the worst problem with people of color.
Yeah,
like no one is voting for him.
So does the Democratic Party. I mean, we've seen
Joe Biden.
They're all gone from the.
Joe Biden.
They're all gone from.
No, Joe Biden. That's not the point though. The point is when people of color want to elect a Democrat, they're not looking at Pete Buttigieg. They're looking at Joe Biden.
Yeah.
They're looking at Elizabeth Warren for some odd reason. She has a pretty decent size.
Not so much Bernie Sanders.
But not so much Bernie Sanders. Pete Buttigieg has no path after Vermont. I mean, once you get into North or South Carolina, he goes nowhere.
Yeah, crazier things have happened. I mean,
there are crazier things.
Again, nobody thought Barack Obama was going to be the nominee. They thought he was too
I feel
young.
like if you heard him,
they thought it was too. No, nobody thought he was going to be the nominee.
They were putting him
That was
on the. He spoke. I think it was the cycle before convention.
Yes, but going up against Hillary Clinton, nobody and again another cast of people that we've now forgotten. Nobody thought that this kind of first term. Not even first term. He was like halfway into.
But he had,
you
saw the charisma and you saw the passion and the following that came to him as soon as he started talking in places like Iowa, right? As soon as he started delivering speeches, he was able to gather this following. I don't see Buttigieg having the same response during a speech of bringing on all these people and uniting this whole people.
We've also never elected a mayor.
It's
pretty low on the totem pole.
Yeah, it's very difficult. I agree,
especially from Indiana.
I know it's 100,000 people. I agree with you that I could see a dark horse coming out after the first three, and then us seeing what Super Tuesday looks like. That I could see us going through right now. But breaking the cardinal rule. Anyways,
phone's on.
Jesus, Jay.
I will say this. I think. At the end of the day, it still will be Joe Biden, unless there's a huge scandal, Burisma, that will come out of where goes Ukraine.
No, at this point, I don't think.
And I agree, and that's why I think Joe Biden is going to be.
I don't think Burisma even does anything.
And to Andrea's point, because she commented, Bloomberg. No, Bloomberg still has no following. I don't see anybody coming through and voting for him. There's no movement around him. It's the same thing as it's the same thing as Steyer, right? It's his people who just they can get enough votes to get on stage, and they can, like you said, they can buy enough to make it to the next stage, but there's no 30% movement.
The worst thing that could happen to the Democratic Party would be to allow for a billionaire to end up their nominee and basically buy their primary election.
It would undermine their entire argument as far as economics.
Sure.
Well, you lose 40% of the base.
Well, not only that, I mean,
immediately.
You're essentially running. That's what happened to Romney. You can't say that.
You're essentially running, I mean, personality differences aside, but you're essentially running Donald Trump against a Donald Trump.
Left Donald Trump versus right Donald Trump?
Yeah, exactly.
Also, but the thing is, with the Donald Trump situation,
1980 versus Donald Trump versus 1990 Donald Trump.
He didn't buy staffers that were. If you were a staffer for Donald Trump in the beginning, you were dedicated. You weren't getting paid. There was people were leaving their jobs to jump on because they saw something happening. When it comes to
you could
Bloomberg,
just see the room.
No one is supporting him, and if you are a staffer, you don't support him anyways. You know why? Because you want that $10,000 check every single month. Because that's the ridiculousness of what he's paying his staffers: $8,000, $7,000, $9,000, $10,000, $12,000 a month, so that they take those staffers off the board, so no one else can get him. He has almost 500 staffers national, and these are people, and we know some of these people that are taking that check because it is January in the election cycle, and they think and they're promising their income it's for the rest of the cycle, which is crazy.
You know who fascinates me right now though is Amy Klobuchar, and because I watched part of the debate and I hadn't actually stared at her in that amount of time for that many minutes in a row. And I've never seen somebody whose hair doesn't move, and her I don't want to be super derogatory about what I think she looks like, but I just feel like I look at her and I'm like, people are kind of pegging her as a dark horse and stuff too, and I'm like, you can't. That would be the worst hair debate between her and Donald Trump.
The way she moves her head, the way she moves her head, and it moves a little.
It wiggles. Here. No, it wiggles I couldn't focus on what she was actually saying.
We're talking about her hair, and this is very misogynistic.
No,
I don't think I've ever heard anything she's ever said.
We talk about Trump's hair too. I feel like it's the same thing.
I agree that we talk about the beauty of the Trump hair coif. I think it's real. What TV show was he on that someone touched it?
No, it's real. I mean, look, jokes aside, my dad also has Jimmy Johnson Trump-esque kind of hair. It's just the comb over. It's just decades of comb over. It's just it's real, dude. That and tons of Aquanet. I mean, it's just the real deal. So.
And I'm almost always gonna vote for the person that uses the most
product
in their hair.
Right now, it's. I can tell you right now,
it does not move.
I can tell you right now,
a parade, 18 hours.
It's Klobuchar right now, and she has the most product in the hair. It doesn't move. It just wiggles side to side, so from all the different angles.
No,
I couldn't handle it. I couldn't pay attention.
Going through the rest of what happened in the last debate, which I thought was a yawn all the way until the hot mic situation.
Ooh, yes.
At the end, which I love because CNN are thugs when it comes to the hot mic because they know for a fact they did that on purpose.
Yeah.
And CNN is as biased as they could have been because of the questions.
Yeah, extremely biased. That's why we have the CNN whistleblower coming to the TBYR event on Monday night at 6:30.
That's right.
I love it.
Yep.
Good job.
Good.
See, he wears a suit. He looks
tie-in.
good.
Yeah.
You can keep going. I just need to just
Well, and the debate itself was so lame that they needed something to draw people to go back and watch it, or at least pick it apart. Because there really wasn't there other than that moment. There really wasn't anything there that anybody was talking about or that really made any waves. Like in the previous debate where Buttigieg got into it with Warren, like there was no moment like that. And then really, if anything, this saved their debate coverage because otherwise I don't think anybody would be talking about it.
Would it really be considered the debate when it happened afterwards? It's like
it would happen on the stage.
Like,
it happened,
Yeah, like really, like people are talking about what the brawl that happened afterwards. But again, the fact that you wanted them to talk about policy. You wanted them to get into it with policy. What did they talk about? Well, you said I couldn't become president when we had a conversation by ourselves, and there's no one else that can quote what's going on. Literally,
yeah. She was basically trying to make him out to be a sexist,
and her staff let it loose, leaked it to CNN the week before the debate. This was all such fiction, and no one in the media is buying what actually happened. They're saying, you're telling me a man that's been saying that a woman should be president for 30 years is now saying to Warren that, I don't think a woman can be president. And not even saying that he's taking it out of context or she's taking it out of context. It's just petty.
Right.
This was a set-up, coordinated, in-kind donation between the DNC and CNN to the Warren campaign.
To the Biden campaign.
And the Biden campaign.
Yeah. I would say so.
Is this a tax write-off? Are they going to get some documentation?
I don't think there's a monetary value on this, but we can probably get some.
I mean, the fact that the Democrats continue to allow an independent to run in their party just blows my mind.
No, they don't want him out.
Because of course they do. But again, instead of changing the rules and saying, no, dude, you got to pledge allegiance to the Dems, to be able to run as a Democrat.
Well, you can't. Because at the end of the day, you have these people that are in the party that are so supportive, right? I mean, like they're kicking at if anybody that they
but I think if you drew the line in the sand and said, Bernie, you're either an independent or you're Democrat, but you got to make.
But he has the main
years ago before this current cycle.
But their biggest voice in the Democratic Party is AOC and that camp, and she came out and endorsed him. So you have an entire wing of the
Democrat.
But they're all the wing of the party that are. What again? When Caesar was here, we were talking about this, right? About how they are still fighting for the heart of that party, and there's a good 50% of them that want that to be the party. They don't want these moderate.
Yeah, but
Democrats.
that's what I'm saying. Look at what happened with Republicans and Trump. If Trump had run as an independent and said, you know what, I am an independent, but you know what, I'm going to run against the Republicans, they would have said, no, screw you, buddy. Like you're either a Republican or you're not, and you're either in our primary or you're not. But the problem they refuse to do that.
But the problem is. Bernie has been running with the Democrats for so long. He has 10, 15, 20% of that block already. So this is what we were talking about earlier. The moment he doesn't win the primary, that 30% is not going to support the Democrats.
This isn't once but twice now.
This is now twice that they screwed him over. And I have friends that are working as Democrat operatives in California, and they're literally having conversations at their headquarters like, well, if Bernie doesn't win, if Warren doesn't win, then we're not going to vote for Joe Biden. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And
that's what happened last time.
That's what they're saying.
It's exactly what happened last time.
Again.
Yeah.
So it's and that's where it's like I wouldn't be surprised if Trump wins the popular vote. And you have more people out on the West Coast.
And again, I think we can again end the Democratic debate conversation on this show by saying, and this is why Trump is going to win, and we'll come back next week and we'll update you again on why he's going to win.
Yeah, exactly. So
again, they just did it. They needed to bring someone that wasn't crazy, and they continue to not be able to do that.
All right, so again, back to the list of topics. Thank you again so much for watching. Again, if you haven't seen the links here throughout the show, we now got our Patreon set up. If you'd like to help us distribute the show around the country, again, all the funds whether it be sponsorships or donations. It's all going to go to the show. None of us get paid to do this, and sometimes it shows. But bringing up our list of topics, we've got the trade deals now. Again, huge news that got overshadowed intentionally, I would say, but intentionally, unintentionally, by all the other political news that was happening and distractions such as Megxit, which if you haven't caught
not a
that
distraction. More important news.
All right, so trade deals, China, Japan, big win for Trump, was it not? What do you guys think?
So the USMCA and the China Phase 1 deals were passed in the last few days. I feel that it was a complete win and show of how stupid impeachment articles were, because you impeach the president and then you pass UMCA the same day, which means that you don't care about impeachment, and then you do the pomp and circumstance. And then Phase 1 of China, I think the Phase 1 of China will be quite interesting. What's happening, it's the centerpiece of Trump's deal with China, as it's committed to $200 billion in the next 2 years that China will be purchasing a total of $77.7 billion of manufacturing goods, $32 billion in agricultural products. The tariffs of 25% will still be in place on $250 billion, or 7.5% tariffs on still goods that are made in China that will be remaining and negotiated for Phase 2.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a step in the right direction. Is it a huge win? No. And obviously people are going to disparage the whole deal because it's not everything he wanted or everything. But again, and anyone in business will tell you this, sometimes you got to chop it up and go in pieces and kind of, build your way there. And I think this is a good first step.
With this, I look at it the same way as all the other deals that he said he was going to renegotiate, right? It doesn't matter if he was the one that blew it up and pieced it back together and put in one different word in the agreement, right? He's going to do the same thing that he did with all the other agreements, right? I redid NAFTA. I redid the Iran deal. And he's going to just point to all these. People are not paying attention enough to understand the key differences between this China deal and the last China deal, or the tariff. It's too confusing for anybody. But what he can do now is, when it comes to election time, he can walk up to the American people and say, I said I was going to be harder on China. We did this, and then I was going to renegotiate a deal. And he's going to tell everybody it's a better deal. He renegotiated the deal, and it's better for us. And, and nobody's going to really – I mean, people will question it on the other side, right? Like, they're going to – like you said – they're gonna say that everything he did was bad. It's going to make the economy worse and blah blah blah. But when he's standing in front of the American people, he can say, "Check another box. Yeah. I redid this."
Right. No, that's a great way to put it, because that's exactly what he's done. And again, I think if given the opportunity for another 4 years, we're going to allow, to see kind of the full execution of what he's working on. And so far, the economy and economists and the stock market has all agreed that we're going in the right direction. That's undisputable.
I mean, gas is under $3 a gallon. The stock market is over 30,000.
Yeah, the stock market freaked out for like a second, and then people are already saying that 30,000's around the corner.
I saw a tweet the other day that one of the Republican accounts had pulled back up from 2016, and he was like, get all your money out of the stock market now. It's 2016. He's like, Trump's unpredictability is going to be way too crazy. We can't trust the stock market. And he's like, I'm taking all my kids' monies out of the stock market right now. And it's like, and then the caption was like, Dow at 16,000. And then it's like Dow in 2019 and 2020 now at like 36,000. So it's like, people warned everybody in the world, like, he's going to ruin the economy. He's going to ruin the stock market. He's unpredictable and blah. But look how high it is now. I mean, look what's going on.
You keep on hearing liberal pundits say that the country is in disaster. The country's on fire. That everything's a disaster. Trump is destroying the America. And I think to myself, are traffic lights not working anymore? Are people not following the rule of law? Like, what's going? I don't understand. How is it to where you think the house is on fire and I'm just sitting here sipping tea, thinking everything's fine?
At the top of Vail. I mean, I just don't see how. I agree with you completely, right? Like, I don't see how you can shape the country right now as on fire the way that they're trying to by the time the election comes, because I look around and I see people in every industry, whether it be the home industry or that real estate agents are talking about it, and people in the stock market are talking about it, and people in regular business or freelancers, whatever you may be. Everybody's looking around at each other right now, and whether they want to attribute it to politics or not, and they're going like, things are pretty good right now, right? Like, everybody's in work. Like, I just don't see how you can paint the doomsday picture when everybody around is like, things aren't that bad.
Real
They
estate
have to.
solid,
They have to.
business is
Yeah.
solid. Well, and again, you're looking at an article that came out this week, where Fiat Chrysler is expanding $400 million into manufacturing jobs, and in,
People are buying Fiats. I mean,
it's
it's that's how good. That's how much money is floating around. People are buying Fiats in America.
Oh my gosh, that is the soundbite right there.
All right, side note and topic maybe for another day, but why are there so many Maseratis in Tampa?
So actually, there's a reason for that.
It is the most affordable pseudo luxury car you
Yeah.
can buy.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And
think
we
that's a
have
pretty
a
accurate
huge pipeline
way.
that gets a lot of them get shipped here. A lot of are used.
That's
get
so
pumped up
weird.
here.
All right, anyway.
There's someone on my block that has one, and I had to question. I'm like, whoa. Like I don't live in Cheval, but I'm like, damn, what is going on? And then I realized the real estate prices in my neighborhood are shooting up, and I'm like, someone took us out some equity.
Yeah, someone took out a second mortgage to
Oh
buy a
my God.
Maserati.
I
Yeah.
will say, and
IP as far as the tariffs go, real quick.
no, why
No,
did you bring it up?
no. They won't let me get into China stealing our intellectual property. I'm gonna save it for an entire hour one day when we just dedicate the entire show to all of the intellectual property. they're
Chris,
stealing
this is the
from us,
last
but-
time you're on this.
Well, to me, that may have been the one area of this whole China deal where I wish they had been a little stronger.
They're not. It's phase one.
But regardless, I don't think China is even a business or trade ally that you can trust ever.
Oh no,
I don't think they'll ever be that.
I fully think they're going to break one or all of their what they're supposed to stick to in phase one.
Well, what
which
we
will
didn't
then
include in
restart
this,
all the tariffs.
what we didn't include in this deal is like, hey, also get rid of your concentration camps. Like we didn't include that, right?
there are a
So
lot of
like,
things that we didn't include.
if they're not, if we're not,
Baby steps.
yeah.
Yeah.
If we're not going to do things like that, where we're going to enforce, I don't know, stop putting people in concentration camps and
Stop
like
harvesting their
basic
organs.
stop
human
harvesting
rights.
organs, stop coming to America and stealing all of our intellectual property from our universities. Like if we don't talk about any of that stuff. Again, I'm glad the trade deal got done, but it's like there's still a lot of work to be done. Maybe in phase 2 or 3 or 8.
Well,
So
again, I don't think they're going to abide by all the requirements that they're being asked to do. I will say what's probably going to happen is they're going to renege on one or two of their commitments, which is going to reset everything back over again, which then Trump can say, look, they lied, they didn't do what they were supposed to do, I'm hitting them with a hammer, which Americans love when that happens. U.S. businesses are moving their manufacturing out of China into other parts of Southern Asia and other parts of the world that is cheaper, and they control a bit more of it. This is just hurting China more and more. And if you read into what's happening, they have the slowest growth ever at 6%, which is crazy, 6% growth year over year. But people are saying that's completely fake. The moment China is no longer able to lift itself up, it's going to collapse. And the moment that happens, I will be drinking, I don't know, Chardonnay when that happens or something like that to celebrate the collapse of the biggest country in the world.
Oh my God! All right, what do we got next there, Chris? Again, we've talked about quite a bit already, but going from one corrupt government to another, it's time to talk about Puerto Rico. And, it hurts me because I have a lot of friends, obviously, living here in Central Florida, both in Orlando, here in Tampa. We have a huge Puerto Rican community, many of them close friends. And as I mentioned, and the biggest thing is that, they continue to throw stones at the president because he continues to have very little faith in the Puerto Rican government and I think it's appropriate. There's people that have been arrested now, for corruption, and we continue to see no signs of progress politically. The state in general has been pretty good about recovery and kind of turning the corner after the hurricanes. But now with these earthquakes, they kind of almost taken, 2 steps back.
Well, the biggest thing right this week was the fact that there was a warehouse found full of aid. And so all those paper towels that he was out there throwing, they were in a warehouse somewhere that nobody was going to pick up for the rest of the country.
He was talking about the Puerto Rican people as second-class people. He was talking down to them, and that you cannot do when these are the people you are representing.
Well, that's one piece of it, but again, there's if everything was fine, you can get away with that kind of stuff, right? But you can't do that when you have an entire country that's really struggling, and that's what they're going through down there. No, go ahead.
So. It really hasn't worked out so well in several instances.
Just because my skin is brown. Be real honest.
Would you agree?
I think all foreign aid in general.
It's not foreign though. It's domestic. There are territories.
Not all of Central America.
No.
Is our territory or colony. Oh God, this is getting
I'm
bad.
talking about
real
American
fast.
aid from FEMA to our Latin American territories.
How many Latin territories do we have?
We have
I cannot deal with this right now. How many?
a handful at least.
How many?
Puerto Rico.
One.
Would you consider? You wouldn't consider the Virgin Islands to be
Their territory.
But there's all of these, but these places that we're talking about.
27 countries in Central and the Caribbean. How many are?
Let's rephrase the question.
This is what happens when you don't prep for today's topics.
So
foreign aid does not go to Puerto Rico.
I didn't say
or to
foreign
other
aid.
ones.
I said
no. He was saying disaster relief that goes to our territories in other places. So but then take Puerto Rico, take the U.S. Virgin Islands, places where there's been a natural disaster. They are our territories. It's been botched, is what he's trying to say.
So
which is different than our Latin America.
I think what happens is there's been a long history of corruption in Puerto Rico, and it's been allowed to continue because people were not taking seriously what was happening. It was almost like a slush fund because at the end of the day, though putting money in Puerto Rico, you were almost guaranteeing a certain amount of votes in large Puerto Rican congressional districts in New York, in some parts of the East Coast, and then in some parts of Florida. Now that can't happen because there's been such an important view of what's happening there, and that needs to happen.
Yeah.
What she did was she removed it from the chief of emergency management and then directed it to the National Guard, which again is a military organization which is then connected to the U.S. government to release all those supplies, which actually went to 10 distribution centers in Puerto Rico. Do I believe that our giving aid to Puerto Rico is inappropriate and has been used inappropriately? I do agree that the funds are being, as corruption, it's being wasted. However, they are still a U.S. territory, and we need to be sending those funds there. Now, does it mean that we need to build an agency to watch those funds? I don't know, because now we're talking about another government agency.
This is what I was getting at. I don't think that aid should be cut off. I think that until we have a means to make it effective and make it actually perform the way it's supposed to, maybe FEMA should oversee it instead of the government. I don't
want FEMA to overlook it, but Trump has already made
we can't do that anymore.
It's another impeachment article. I say that Trump has already made this comment before, that he believed that funds were not being used correctly. And it was true. Funds weren't being correctly the first time he talked about it with Puerto Rico. This now brings it up back again that he was correct, that the government officials of Puerto Rico are very corrupt and that something needs to happen. And the only way that happens is with new elections. Do I think that the current governor, Wanda, do you remember her last name? No. Nor do I care. Wanda at the moment is a huge.
And we're the ones that don't prep for the show.
At least I knew her first name. You know what? You guys don't even know how many territories the U.S. has in the Caribbean.
A few.
Because
every
truth of the matter the truth of the matter is just that Puerto Rico is accustomed to a certain way of life, and the corruption is so deeply entrenched in the government. That a majority of the island either works for the government or depends on the government, financially. And so one election is not going to make a difference.
Correct.
No, you need to Puerto Rico's got a lot of problems. I think there's a lot of fundamental issues that need to be worked on. And again, this is just kind of a symptom of a lot of, like you said, there's so much reliance on government aid in that country that we're not allowing them to even have an economy. We're also not allowing them to trade freely and correctly. We've got all these. weird bills that were implemented that affect their imports and exports, and all of these type of things. Again, longer conversation, more in depth, get a lot more nuanced detail.
But that's all corruption. All of that is corruption.
It's somewhat corruption, somewhat a little bit of an ineptitude on our side of, again, these are unintended consequences of bad bills that have been passed through in past sessions. It's not something recent. Again, this is a long term problem.
This is the larger. We're not hitting on a larger conversation, which always comes up every 4 to 8 years. Is Puerto Rico going to stay a territory, or is it going to become a state, or is it going to become its own national country? Which is the conversation that needs to happen every single time. Because again, if we're truly believing that Puerto Rico should, either piss or get off the pot. Honestly, you either become a state or you become your own country.
But right, it's up to us though, at the end of the day.
No, it's up to them.
Somewhat. I mean, there's got to be a movement on their end, but on our end.
I'm telling you right now, if Trump thought it was 52% of Puerto Ricans in Puerto Rico wanted to become its own country, Trump would sign that in a heartbeat.
I don't know about that because again, like places like the Virgin Islands, like they've been trying to get statehood for a long time. Like they've been trying to get the ability to vote. They can't vote even though they're a territory, right? Like they want representation in Washington the same way. But the problem is that we don't give it to them because we're just like, no. You know what I mean? Like there's no movement in this country to give the people in the Virgin Islands or in Puerto Rico voting right. And
50 is a nice easy number.
Yeah. I don't want to have to buy a new flag just because we decide to make another country a state.
That seems like
51.
I do feel like
that's so weird of a number.
Where do we put that star?
Well, that's
I don't know
you
where
gotta
you
get
put
two.
the
You have to do the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico. Now you have
Are
two.
those the only territories that you can think of right now?
In the Caribbean?
All right. On that note, sorry about we had some technical issues. We may have lost audio for a little while.
Yeah,
it was mostly over that Puerto Rico conversation. So
Thank God.
You guys looked horrible in that conversation.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You were straw manning me, to be fair.
Because
you thought I said I was going to cut all aid to Latin America.
You said foreign aid. You said foreign aid. And that's why I went straight.
We're moving forward.
Because Puerto Rico is not in Central America.
So, all right. So let's go ahead and move on to the next topic, which was Virginia. Speaking of actually more like intended consequences with bad policy, of course, Governor Blackface, as some of them are calling him, Northam, of course, tried to call a state of emergency because of a Second Amendment rally that was to happen at the Capitol. And, it kind of went off without a hitch, no incidents. Great demonstration of responsible gun ownership and activism. And, the amazing thing is that because it went off without a hitch and because there were no incidents, we're probably not going to hear much about it in the greater media. And it's sad because I do think that this was a test run.
Well, we are the greater media,
this was,
and we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, no, and I think that this was a test run, for liberals to see how far can they push the gun rights argument.
Yeah, and I think that this was a great response from our side of things, right? Where you have 22,000 people standing up on day one. Like this wasn't like actually starting to be implemented. They weren't trying to take your guns the next day, but these set of bills that were going to come through, the reaction that there was of again 22,000 people standing up for our Second Amendment rights. It's a pretty amazing thing to see. And again, I think it's a great, I would say, it's a good example to show the rest of the country of what would happen if you start to try and implement laws like this, is that we have an extremely passionate population that are going to stand up for our rights. And it's going to happen really quickly.
You saw how quickly all of those counties became sanctuary counties for the Second Amendment. The spread of that was amazing to watch. And then to see how quickly West Virginia was trolling about trying to pass laws to allow counties in Virginia to secede and join West Virginia, which was, I loved it. I thought it was a great conversation.
That is a great conversation because that's the thing. At the end of the day, you have all of these different counties that are here, and I love hearing from the sheriff of a county, and I get 95% of the counties of Virginia all agreed upon this, right? They were saying, we're not going to enact these laws. We're not going to do this. We're not going to take this kind of, oversight from the federal government to come in here and try and take something from us. And again, it made me proud to be on the Republican side. It made me proud to be, again, on the side fighting for freedom, because again, you see all these other protests that are happening across the world, right? You see Hong Kong, and you see places like Puerto Rico, but places like North Korea, like all these places that in Taiwan, like all of these places that you have protests going on of governments infringing on rights. Like this is the first one, right? This it's the second one technically, but like it's like the first one that keeps us with the ability to enforce all the other ones before somebody comes out and tells us what we can and can't do.
Who was the comedian that made the statement earlier?
Chappelle.
What did Chappelle say?
Chappelle said he's like, I get to come up here because of my First Amendment rights, and the second one's there in case somebody decides to try and mess with the first one. Yeah. And he had a great joke about it last week. Yeah. Right. He said it better than I did.
I will say this kind, and for some reason I've been nerding out about this, watching the online county protests and them having multiple sheriffs from every single county in Virginia saying that, look, we're going to switch over to a sanctuary county.
Yeah.
I say Virginia turns red, honestly. I think this is such a big deal that has enraged and it's not the metropolitan areas of Virginia, because all those people live and work in the Beltway. It's Virginia proper. It's all those additional counties that have been slipping away lately into Democratic hands. I think there's going to be a wave of Republicans, especially now that, and I think we can say this now, that nothing crazy has happened in Virginia since the rally started earlier this morning. Which you would have thought, after reading all the news articles, that there was going to be an overthrow of the Capitol of Virginia, because you truly thought that what people wanted.
That's because they would have taken the next step where they were trying to confiscate. Then you would see the overthrow. Then you would see the march on the Capitol. But that's not what was happening there. But again, it's a great. I like seeing that response, right? Like I want people to be out in the streets when people are trying to do this kind of thing.
I really do want to see what happens. Because again, I've always made the joke that you can talk all you want when it comes to confiscating guns from New York all the way down to the southern line, but then trying to cross the Mason-Dixon line is going to be impossible to start confiscating guns.
Was there actually a confiscation conversation?
No, there wasn't, but that's what people are worried about.
So, no, the governor was making comments that if your model was already purchased before the law, they were going to retroactive to where they were going to, they almost like a clawback clause. And that was then people were trying to say, well, then you should call the National Guard and to take back those guns. It just snowballed, and it probably has nothing to do with reality. It just snowballed because people were freaking out, and that's what I'm saying. It was people were freaking out because of the idea of someone taking guns, and that is so personal for so many people.
It wasn't necessarily the idea. I mean, again, there was like 8 bills introduced that pushed on this, and again, the next logical step when you have something that goes this far is to step in and start like confiscating, again, like retroactively saying, well, you can't have this one, or they had one that was you can only buy 1 gun per month, which is again. It's just one of these things that all of these different pieces come together and people get really upset.
Well, you're telling Americans not to do something.
You can't do
that. That is automatically going to force them to want to buy 12 guns and 300 rounds of ammunition, which I assume means a lot. I don't know.
Not really, that's a day.
I know. 1,500. There you go. Popped it up. But again, you're telling Americans not to do something. We're going to do it anyways. I mean, and we can digress into like the war on poverty and the war on drugs. If you tell people not to do something, they're going to do it anyways, but I digress.
So, Chris and I had a conversation before the show regarding large gatherings like this. So we can have 10,000 law-abiding Second Amendment supporters and 5 pieces of trash who will ruin the entire demonstration and turn that entire two-way demonstration into a prime example for the left to look down on us.
Yep.
So, one thing that I saw, a couple of examples today, there was one person talking about killing somebody, and he was like, I'm a libertarian, this is what we believe in. And another guy was like, no, I'm a libertarian, this is not what we do. And this guy was shouted down by the entire crowd.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
And that's the kind of story you do hear coming out of places like this, where there's 22,000 people, right? Like, I can tell you, if you take 22,000 people and put them in a room, there's probably a lot of bad people out of 22,000, right? Even if it's 1 out of every 500. So, like you're saying, there are there are bad actors within, again, the group this large, but what ends up happening is, like you said, the Democrats and the media will go and they'll pull out that one person, and they'll be like, look at this Second Amendment. Yeah, I mean, and then they'll be like, look at this Second Amendment rally, and look at these, terrible Republicans. They're doing all this terrible stuff. They're ruining the country, and again, that's how you end up getting legislation like this passed in the first place.
But at the end of the day, I don't care. At the end of the day, honestly, as a Republican, you have to be prepared to take on that fight. As a Republican, as a conservative, as a libertarian, that the media is going to take anything you say and twist it. They're going to do anything they can to make you look like the bad guy. So Republicans that are watching this and that are going to go to these rallies, you have to be as poised as possible. Because one, you taking the day off of work as a Republican is something that's not going to happen. So right there, a lot of Republicans are not going to be at these rallies. How on earth do they have a Women's Day in the middle of the week? My mom made a comment, she's like, do none of these women work? And I was like, oh, they probably do, but they're also like white liberals from like New Hampshire. And of course they don't work. And so I don't understand where people get upset, where they like, yes, because I get it, that one bad apple is going to make us look bad, but as Republicans, they always do that to us. So we always have to be ready for that.
Oh, of course. But I think for centrists and people who are undecided, it can be a very bad look for us. So I agree we shouldn't dictate our behavior based on bad apples. Do you think that the rallies are the best way to put our message out there? Do you think there's a more effective way that would allow us to put our message out at the risk of being exposed?
I think there's definitely better ways of doing it than a rally, right? 22,000 people is kind of out of control. I mean, of being able to, like from like a Republican messaging standpoint, right? Like you want to be able to fight this kind of thing in legislation, and you want to be able to do it through the media and putting out informative, maybe messaging and things like this, like going on a podcast and talking about it, right? If you're a legislator, but again, at the end of the day, when you have bills that start passing through, people end up uprising, right? Like it comes out of your control, becomes out of the hands of the messaging of the Republican Party or the NRA.
But you're seeing it now that the rallies are working. Again, I don't know if something has come up in the last 2 hours, but I've been online. So. And if we could have someone do a quick search to make sure it wasn't a mass shooting in Richmond, then I think we'll be fine. But I will say this: rallies like this matter. Going out and showing your support for something matters. Yeah. There's a reason why liberals get so upset that Trump can fill a 40,000 person arena like this and then have an extra 15,000 people waiting outside. They hate that because they don't know how to make their rallies transition into votes. Trump did that in the last election. Bernie, for as big as the rallies that he pulled, never translated that into votes. And we'll see that now if he can do that again. I don't know how we jump back into. I don't want to go back.
No, we're not going back. We're not going to the Democratic debate. We're actually going to move forward, and we're going to go into the legislative
and
stuff in Florida.
I'm really upset on the fact that we're going to go into this, and the only reason why is because I think they're doing a great job, which they are saying they're doing their job and they're shutting the fuck up. And because of that, I am perfectly happy not hearing about them. However, we are having a great treat right now, having a good friend of the show and mine personally, Matt Lettler, on the show at the moment. So if we can go to camera.
Yeah, we've transitioned out of Johnny was sitting there. You're not seeing things.
I'm not Johnny.
You're not Johnny.
We've upgraded to a person with a tie, Jonathan Torres.
I just came from the Indiana University Bicentennial Celebration over at Capitol Grill, so it's 200 years since the Indiana legislature founded Indiana University, so we're celebrating that today, and now I'm here with you all. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. Thanks for coming.
Across the bay.
We don't do that often.
Keep it between us,
We don't do it that often, so we appreciate you doing it.
You guys have to get shots to come over to see us.
I won't comment.
Honestly, the only time I'm over the bridge is like with drinks from that. So that's all I'm going to say there.
I have one comment to make on the Second Amendment, though.
Sure.
Just real quick.
Go for it.
We're talking about suns out, guns out.
Yeah.
Well, Anibal, the sky's out, thighs out today. No one is telling him not to wear shorts when it's 48 degrees.
First of all, I did my duty celebrating MLK Day the parade at MLK. And I was not going to wear vodka. And I wasn't going to wear long pants while I'm sitting in the sun, even though I drove a truck. So
it was cold out.
Now when you're standing there for 3-4 hours waiting for the parade to start moving.
The skies were out today and your thighs obviously were out.
Well, I'm wearing very fashionable pants from Lululemon. And so I don't think they make
Anyway,
So we're moving to
legislative
legislative session. You guys see how hard it is for me to transition from one topic to another?
Oh, I love it when you do it wrong. So, Matt Liller, what are your opinions on? Did we talk about the Second Amendment? Do you want to continue that?
No, I'm good.
Okay. So, what can we expect for this season, for this session coming up?
The session. Well, actually, I was up there this past week. Attended the opening day session in the State of the State with Governor DeSantis, and the biggest issues up there right now are teacher pay.
Sure.
Finding the money in the budget. What do you cut from X to be able to fund Y? We have to have a balanced budget in the state of Florida. That's a constitutional mandate.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a big thing, is where do you get the money. Number two, really the E-Verify debate is going to be huge. It looks like there's been a deal cut. Senator Joe Gruters has offered up basically a compromise saying, all right, E-Verify, but only if you are a government or that you have government contracts in the state or cities. So, we'll see how that flies. But then Speaker Oliva, he really kind of laid on the table and said that we're not going to spend our way into caring for people. Doing things is the way that you care for people.
Sure.
And the biggest thing that's on his agenda, it seems, is scope of practice for nurse practitioners, that they can serve people up to the level of their training, not just what the legislature or what the state law currently mandates.
I love that niche of a topic, because you should not limit someone because of what a government agency is requiring them to do. If they have the training, if they have the proper education, they should be able to assist and be able to provide that practice. And they do it with a much less cost than going into a doctor's or something like that. So, and it allows for more people to be able to get that mandate.
Yeah, a number I heard earlier was, if you go to see a nurse practitioner because you have the flu, and they're able to prescribe you Tamiflu or something like that, it's like $55. If you go to a doctor's office, they bill insurance for about $100.
Yeah, I mean it's a bigger issue, right, than what he's trying to do, because there's a problem there. If it costs $1,100 for something that should cost $50, that's where a lot of the insurance playing around in there goes. And again, hopefully at some point we'll take care of that, whether it's at the state or the federal level. But I do think that a lot of things you hit on are really important, right? Like obviously, again, teacher pay is going to be a massive one. I mean, you just saw this big demonstration there, talk about rallies. Just a few days ago with all the teachers up there, fighting for better pay. And again, our governor has said that he's going to do that, right? Like he's going to raise all the minimum salaries. So I guess do you see it as something that where they're going to cut from something more important, or do you see that being cut from anything in particular, or it's just going to be kind of a combination of different things, or is some big program going to get cut in order to pay for this?
Well, don't forget, in the state of Florida, the governor can't do anything when it comes to the budget, because he only has line item veto.
Sure.
And because he has line item veto, he's really not going to go veto the entire budget. So you're not going to see him say, oh, well, you didn't give my teachers the funding, so I'm going to veto everything and make everyone come back for a special session. I mean, he could, but unlikely unless there's drastic differences between what he wants and what the legislature puts forward. But the other thing is that you got to look at the other priorities. Visit Florida.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big thing for the governor, big thing for the state senate. But Speaker Oliva says get rid of it. That's $50 million.
Yeah.
So, there was an article that came out the other day that Chair Chris Latvala, has he been on the show? Maybe not yet.
Yeah.
But he had his committee go through all the education funding and find money for K-12 education.
Yeah.
They found $426 million that
Wow.
they're basically able to eliminate programs, redundancies, etc., and put towards the teacher pay. So now they're only about $100 million.
You would think that they would do that every year.
And I've actually talked to a couple state reps about them doing that every year.
Yeah.
So.
So we're not laughing about that. So
I guess I'm supposed to be closer to the microphone.
Anyway, so besides teacher pay, because
I'm gonna need you to get it.
I could try and keep it together, Johnny, when we saw around.
Wow, and then you call him out on it.
I have to.
So we do have some Republican teachers that have been communicating with us in the underground teacher chat for Republicans.
In your house?
No. Wow, just calling out right there. Great.
Underground teacher chat.
Now I'm going to get a conversation about this. No, there actually is a group chat of Republican teachers, which is so funny.
Underground, like Reddit?
No.
It's like credit for like level teachers. It exists.
Everyone to keep it together. And the larger conversation within teacher pay is that they don't agree with the fact that because some teachers are just now getting up to the point where it's $50,000 to $55,000 a year. And these teachers have been in for 5 to 8 years, and now you're having a conversation that just going right in at 50, and that's causing a huge problem within the teachers' ranks right now. And so I would love to see how that conversation gets flushed out, because you're going to have a lot of teachers now so upset that we're having a problem with retainment because they're getting upset with the fact that they're not being kept up to where they should be.
So, well, it's not my purview. A lot of the teachers that you see don't want to see a starting salary that's at 48, 49, I guess number 2 in the country for a starting teacher salary. They want to see a flat raise for everybody.
Yes.
And I mean, I understand there are
Sure.
If I've been working there for 10 years and I'm only making $49,000 now, why should someone that just graduated from college and is going to be a starting teacher in elementary school be making $49,000 a year?
Yeah.
And I'm only making 52 now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's a completely valid complaint. When we kind of dove into this when it was first proposed, I see a lot of good that can be done with it and attracting the right people into the profession versus, again, it being this really low paying profession that
why people don't end up going into because the starting salary is so low, and then even midway through the career. So I think it's a good starting point, and hopefully it can be pitched as a good starting point. And again, the teachers that are upset about the fact that they haven't retroactively made as much, maybe their raises will come a little bit farther down the line. But I think it's a good start, and I think it's a good priority. Again, if there's $500 million in kind of redundant program money, I don't think it's a bad place for it to go compared to a lot of other places it can go, right? I mean, it's not. I don't think it's a waste to invest in education nearly as much as a lot of other things that we waste on.
Yeah, but you saying investing into education, that has a lot of spigots that can go into
it. Does.
When it comes to pay, when it comes to educating teachers, when it comes to infrastructure of classrooms. I mean, Tampa itself, or Hillsborough County just imposed an extra tax to increase the infrastructure.
And they haven't fixed anything either.
They have fixed some things, and then those some things are now broken. So I don't know what's happening in Hillsborough County.
Again,
I don't want to hear about over.
So bringing it back home, like things that are just Tampa Bay area, or the St. Pete, Clearwater, Tampa area, as I like to call it.
You mean the Tampa Bay area?
No, yeah, the St. Pete, Clearwater, Tampa area.
Tampa Bay area.
But T. Barta, that is something that has been around for several years. Senator Jack Latvala, created it. It came out, then there was no money, and finally last year they actually got significant funding, $1.5 million, but not reoccurring. So now you have David Green, the executive director of T. Barta, having to go back up and ask for $1.5 million more just to keep the lights on, just to keep them doing what they need to do.
And that's a deeper conversation that we could have, right? Because we've got these two other agencies that are sitting underneath them as well. We've got our HART and then the PSTA on both sides, especially PS.
Well, they're not exactly underneath them.
Well, sorry, not exactly. I guess that's kind of my point, right? You have these two other agencies that effectively do the same thing just for their side of the bay. And they don't cooperate necessarily in the ways that they need to cooperate. And then T. Barta, in theory, you could merge them all, right? You could merge them all and actually have a unified, regional plan when it comes to transportation, right? That crazy thought.
Maybe get some economy of scale.
SCT Regional Transit Authority. I like it.
We'll work on the name. Tampa Bay.
SPCT. RTA.
Yeah, Tampa Bay. So I feel that there are other parts that are happening right now. I will say that I'm liking where the direction of the leadership is heading in regards to what's happening in session right now. And I like the new leadership that's coming on board. Do you see any pitfalls that might occur this coming session?
I mean, I work for the St. Pete Chamber of Commerce, so I'm focused on the business side of things, but it is the social issues. There's going to be a heartbeat bill that is going to make waves. Is it going to go anywhere? Most likely not in the Senate, maybe in the House. You're going to see once again the anti-discrimination bill that Carlos Guillermo Smith, Jen Webb always put forward. It's gaining more and more co-sponsors from Republicans.
The equality bill?
This is the equality bill. This is to basically you cannot get fired, you can't be refused a hotel room, you can't be refused housing. Based on your gender or sexual orientation or what have you.
Redundant.
Well, so
there's an argument
that it isn't because when it comes to transgenders is really where it runs into, and it's really the bathrooms, and that's where the big holdup is for many conservatives, especially in the Florida House, to not even give it a hearing. So that's one of those issues that does touch on the business side of things, but that the Democrats are getting closer and closer every year to getting at least a hearing on this. It's going to pass one of these days.
One of the things that I've seen, the only news that I've seen from Tallahassee in the past couple of weeks has been from the national side of things, like NBC and Washington Post, coming down on Republicans, and a lot of Republicans from this area that we know that are saying that they're anti-LGBT. They're what else? What other terrible things did they say about us? Like that we basically hate all of these different things. We're anti-gay, anti-trans, all of these, and based on all these bills. But that's not necessarily what all of these bills do. I mean, do you want to talk at all about what was introduced and kind of like the backlash that they're going to face probably the entire session now?
Yeah, I mean, just from a factual standpoint, I mean, there was a bill filed that only put forward that you could not do the what's the term they use? That basically that pray the gay away.
Yeah.
That you couldn't have the
conversion
therapy. Thank you. The conversion therapy for that could not be funded. And so there is that's right, that you could allow that you couldn't have a ban on that at the local level. I think Hillsborough County has a ban on that. There's several other areas in the state that have a ban on that. So basically preempting those bans, much like straws. But so that is the only openly, like, okay, this is absolutely geared towards something that the LGBT community advocates against or for, however you want to look at it. The other bills had to do with preemption of local ordinances, but on a really wide scale. And it was Equality Florida who kind of looked at the worst case scenario. Like, okay, if this passed, an argument can be made that this ban would be preempted, even though it's not set there in the bill. It's not absolutely targeting it, but worst case scenario, hunting horribles. Hey, if you did this, that means this can't happen, and that's not okay with that organization. So they were able to put all three, I think it's 3 or 4 bills together, and lump it in based on the first bill, and get NBC to run a big story on it, etc. So I think all the bills have no chance of getting through both chambers and a governor's signature.
So then I guess
from alive as right now.
Then for more of a political standpoint, then right, we're watching some Republican politicians kind of go out on a limb to put these type of bills out, and I guess if they know it's not going to pass, it's more of a statement on our side. But then again, that the backlash is going to come from a national standpoint now, and brand Floridian Republicans as anti-gay, as anti-trans, and everything like that. And if it almost feels like it was. Now we've got all this attention on us for something that we don't even necessarily all believe, and it's also something that we're not sitting here on this podcast advocating for these things, right? These are things that are just like getting thrown in there, and it's like, but now when I go out to any event and I'm like, hey, I'm the head of the Tampa Young Republicans, they're like, oh, you mean that group that probably advocates for this anti-trans bill, that's the narrative now. It's going to happen around the country, and it's frustrating.
You're going to get that no matter.
You can't stop things coming out of like the panhandle that from like one representative pushing this one bill. So like again, Republicans are always going to get bashed on because we're Republicans, and it's an easy target.
So having a history with the Tampa Bay Young Republicans, back in 2013, I believe it was, when the Defense of Marriage Act was struck down by the Supreme Court. There were Tampa Bay Young Republicans that went over to the Pride Parade in St. Pete and held a sign, Republicans against DOMA.
Yes.
Because it was a federal overreach into states' rights.
And then we filed
a statement piece in the media and release it as a press briefing of our support when it came to our disapproval of DOMA and why we thought DOMA was infringement of rights.
Sure.
And any Republican should be against DOMA. And so we've done it before as an organization, as Young Republicans. We've done it before where we've set a standard for Young Republicans and to move forward. And we have to always be that group of people that preempted those conversations. And again, if someone's going to say that all Republicans are bigots or anti-LGBT, then they're always going to believe that. Nothing is ever going to say that. Nothing I ever say, the last president or last chair of FFYR was an open homosexual, and they're never going to care about that. They don't care because they believe every Republican is anti-gay, and they are so blinded by that hate of a Republican that they're never going to believe otherwise.
Do you think that as far as LGBT rights have gone, we've covered most of that, everything, we're on the same page. Do you think it's gone from you can't do this to me to you must do this for me? Like as in like the cake baking situation, forcing others to bend to your will.
So, I mean, I think that's one of the biggest arguments of our time, and that the Supreme Court has weighed in on and will continue to weigh in on is where do my rights end and yours begin? There's an old saying, my rights end at your nose and your toes. I can't hit you, but I can say whatever I want to you, and you can get right up into here. But at what point does that actually start to infringe on others' rights? So, I mean, this is the abortion debate. This is the gay rights debate. This is anything having to do with sexuality, social issues, etc. So, I mean, that is the greatest debate of our time, and you're seeing a Supreme Court right now that even though it's mostly Republican appointed justices on the Supreme Court, they're still pretty split on it. You're seeing a Republican appointed justice go either way depending on the issue. And that's
are there any?
You're gonna go back to the.
I was gonna say, is there any other issues that you see coming through for the legislative session that are either really important to either Tampa Bay or that you're watching really closely, or that you're really excited about?
I mean, what I'm really excited about, just from St. Pete, because we are really like one of the biggest arts communities in Florida. I mean, Miami, St. Pete. I mean, it really goes. We've got our Basel, we've got Shine Music Festival, etc. So
just having the Dolly Museum put you up there.
The Dolly, the Museum of Fine Arts. We got the Arts and Crafts Museum that's opening later this spring. I mean, we really are a great arts community. Tampa's great arts community as well. But the arts funding,
it forces me to cross a bridge. I'm not gonna lie. For that I love the art scene that's occurring in St. Pete. I love the art scene that is blossoming in many parts of the county. I do have questions about that art installation that just got put down, or they had to refix it. How much did that cost?
Okay,
$40-something million. I mean, I'm not gonna make
40 something million.
Or $4 million. Where's my
dot? Your dot's a little far away. So yeah, there wasn't really a follow-up story there, but basically there was a catch in the netting that once it was shipped down from Janet Eckelman's shop where she built this thing, and then it gets packaged and shipped down to Florida, and there was a catch in something when they pulled it up. So everyone saw this thing go up, they're like, oh, it's up, and then something wasn't right, so they had to bring it back down to get fixed. And they knew that people were going to say, oh, it's got brought down, like something big's going on. It's like, no, this was a small issue. It's back up. Now they're fixing the lights. They're doing it early in the morning.
It's going to be beautiful. It's beautiful.
It is very
cool.
So
as far as the bills go, that you're going to go before Anibal stopped you.
Yeah. So sorry, I got interrupted. But no, it's really it comes down to the Division of Cultural Affairs from the Department of State. They have a grant program that there's, I think it's $57 million of projects that were submitted to this program to be vetted, and they're listed. And there's the number 1 through like number 50 or number 250 something, and it's $57 million worth of projects. And whatever level that is funded is how many projects get funded in that. The problem is that you have people that don't go through that process because they have a powerful legislator that is willing to run their own personal project for them. And so those projects make it in, and at the expense of that program, which has actually been vetted by a nonpartisan, no allegiance to a certain area, whether it's Miami, Tampa, St. Pete, etc. It's just like, okay, this is a good project. They've done all their P's and Q's. We're good. So really, Chris Sprouls actually spoke to the St. Pete Arts Alliance and other people in Pinellas and said, hey, look, if you want a project, put it into that. Don't go to your legislator. Don't come to me. Don't go to Nick DeSegli. Don't go to Wengay Newton, Darryl Rousson. We want to fund this at 100%, but we can't when there's other art projects and there's a senator that says, I'm going to hold up everything in my committee unless this project gets through.
Sure, that is exciting because it probably means that there's going to be a lot more projects that do get through, and hopefully it's more efficient.
Exactly,
superior way to do things as well.
Well, I like to be the one that thanks you for coming on to the show. We love your input and your mind when it comes to what's happening in Tallahassee, because God knows none of us wanted to go to Tallahassee to deal with any of that crap.
You were just there. I saw you there.
What are you talking about?
You were wearing pants, though.
It gets colder up there.
Thank you all very much for having me on. I'm happy to come back anytime.
Was there anything in kind of summary or final that you wanted to talk about as far as something that you're seeing at the legislative session at all?
No, not at the legislative session, but before I head out, if anyone is over in St. Pete on Thursday, the St. Pete Chamber of Commerce is having our annual meeting, and tickets are available online, and would welcome anyone to come to that. It's going to be a great meeting with several surprises that mean a lot for the St. Pete, Clearwater, Tampa area.
Awesome.
Well, we love to support chambers for the Tampa Bay area. And with that, I thank you, Matt Littler.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
So let's switch there we go. And let's see how delicate this looks with Matt sneaking around. Hey, he did a better job than Johnny. I know. It's the yoga that he does in St. Pete Beach. I will say, though, I can't wait. Is the pier done yet? Is the pier? Oh no, it's not.
It's never getting done.
Never.
So we're not talking about the pier. So I guess then to kind of close up the show. It is MLK Day.
Yes.
So one of us made it to the parade today, and
I was in the parade.
In the parade, dies out, everything, just like MLK wanted, and that's what we were talking about. But there are great parades going on around the country, particularly in Tampa's got a great parade, and it is important to. Again, we're a Republican show. We're Tampa Bay Young Republicans, everything. And as little credit as we get for, I feel like trying to bridge racial gaps or trying to bridge, any sort of gap anywhere, I feel like, we do try our hardest to, again, live by a lot of the words that he's trying, was putting out there during the movement. Yeah. And again, whether you disagree with us politically or not, I think that, again, that our hearts all seem like we're in the right place when it comes to, again, a lot of policy that comes out, whether it be social issues or, other injustice issues. And again, we try and do our best to, again, treat everybody equally and live under.
Well, and I would just say that, regardless of whether you believe that he was a Republican or not, right, because that's kind of a common theory out there and nobody's really sure, as to the legitimacy of that claim. I think the greater the greater thought behind that is that he was obviously the leading civil rights advocate, and there was a picture from today's gun rally in Virginia where you had, white citizens, black citizens, Hispanic citizens all together in support of the Second Amendment, which I think is very much in line with what he would have wanted and what he, wants to see for this country. And that despite, all the negative rhetoric that you hear in the news and certainly the things that are said about this administration and how people try to polarize the climate of this country, the truth of the matter is that it's never been a better time to live in the United States. Yeah. And it's not perfect, but racial tension and racism isn't even exclusive to the United States, and oftentimes, I feel like there are people out there that try to make the case that it is. But one of the things that I love about this community is that, I don't feel it here, and I know there's been some issues in certain parts of the Bay Area that, where it has been an issue, but, we're still a young enough city and metropolitan area where we've been able to learn from those mistakes. And move on.
I think it's a lot more rare here in this area and even Florida to a greater extent compared to a lot of other places. I mean, if you travel into a lot of other, again, like you said, older cities that kind of have, things like slavery that are much more part of their history. And not that it's not a part of Florida history, but it's more ingrained in their past. You see a lot more of that. But here again, and here, like you said, in Tampa and Florida, I think that again, things are pretty good here. And again, while there's a little bit of tension sometimes, I think that generally it's pretty good.
And that was done because, and I will give a lot of credit to our leadership in regards to that. The leadership of Hillsborough County, the leadership of Florida, that has always been able to, when something does flare up, they're able to tackle it, and they don't let it fester like other states do. And so we hit it as quickly as possible. When it comes to Hillsborough County, I completely agree. I've lived here my entire life in different parts of the county, and you don't see the rampant racism that you hear about in other parts. And you used a great word, which was rhetoric, which doesn't mean that it's true or not. It's just talking points that people throw out there. And as a Hispanic brown man, big brown guy, in this county and in many parts of this country, I've never felt safer as a young Hispanic male. And I will have to give credence to our sheriff's department. I was at the MLK. I was walking for Danny Alvarez, who's running for circuit court. And just to watch people interacting with police officers, and there was a white, brown, black. I mean, I even pointed out Koreans in the audience, which I thought Peter Chang was there for a moment. I was like, that's not Peter. And then, but once you realize that at the MLK that everyone is there, everyone's having a great time. People are doing cookouts, people are giving out food. Right. The cops are everywhere and are protecting and making sure that there are no incidences, and everyone is loving on everyone. That's exactly how it's supposed to be. Yeah. And I wish it wasn't that we only do this once or twice a year, but that people see it happening all the time.
Well, and I would say this. I would say that, for people who, merely observe this holiday kind of on the surface, to actually take the time, and say, okay, well, I know plenty about Martin Luther King because it comes around every year. It's taught in school, but I'm continually fascinated by African-American history and just how deep it is, and not only here in Florida, but across the country. I mean, and we're having developments every single day, here in Hillsborough County. There's a big issue right now that we're trying to figure out how to solve with the black cemeteries that have been discovered, underneath.
Although it doesn't seem like there's much of a controversy about
No,
that.
it's not a controversy, but it's a discovery.
It's now what to do with it to make sure everyone is respected and everyone is compensated, and how do we move it?
But it's part of our history that people were completely unaware of, and now we have the technology to realize, hey, wow, there was an actual cemetery here that we need to respect, and then how do we go about transitioning towards that to show it the proper respect it deserves?
Yeah, I've never when on the business side of it, you would think there would be more upheaval in regards to stopping the development and not letting it happen. No, you hear, okay, let's figure out a way to excavate those materials and move it to a cemetery where it would be properly buried, because a lot of these are unmapped, and so that's a big issue, but not causing controversy.
No, I don't.
Which is again having good communication with the communities, having good communication with law enforcement and the government, and the local government allows this for a smooth transition.
So, I mean, at an hour and a half, does anybody else have any other final announcements?
Well, I think, it's a good opportunity to kind of tease next week's show. We haven't quite figured out whether we're going to do it before the meeting or after the meeting. But, next week's, maybe we can have your guest speaker for the Tampa Bay Young Republicans on as maybe a guest of the show. But certainly tell them what's happening at your meeting next week.
So we're not 100% sure of how we're going to work it into the show, but something's going to happen next week with the show, so tune in. As far as Tampa Young Republicans go, next week we've got, again, I talked about it last week and the week before. Come out to our meeting at the Barrymore Hotel Monday at 6:30 p.m. We have Kerry Porch. He was the CNN whistleblower that worked with Project Veritas. And again, Project Veritas is working with us this next week, putting together a video kind of summarizing the expose that they did with all the CNN's bias that came out last year at this point. Again, we also have Tampa Young Republicans elections, so if you want to get more involved with Tampa Bay Young Republicans, please do come out, get involved. 2020, it's obviously a massive year, and again, I think we have a fun time, and our events are fun, and they're free, and we get to talk like this, and just isn't any mics around, and so it just gets even more fun.
Well, and I'll talk to Chris Carter, who again is a former CNN stage director, producer type person, see if he can join us for that show, because I think it'd be relevant, especially if we can get your guest on the show as well, for them to kind of give us some deeper insight as to what really the atmosphere is like inside CNN.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. So that's my plug.
Has anyone said hi to Senator Simpson?
Huh?
No, he probably tuned out somewhere after one of our
3 times.
Yeah.
So, well, Chris, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Thanks for having me.
You know, a little bit of a last minute situation, but that's kind of been par for the course for you being on the show. So we appreciate it. It's turned out to be a really good thing for us. We appreciate it.
Last week.
That's right.
Not too much.
Of course, Jake, Anibal, thank you guys as always for being on the show. Don't forget, you can support the show on Patreon, patreon.com/theyardsign. And of course, you can now find us on Apple Podcasts. Just a search for The Yard Sign.
Yeah, that's the big news. Why did we not talk about that? We're on iTunes now.
Dude, I've mentioned it like 3 times.
Did you? I wasn't paying attention. Get on iTunes.
Androids, it's not that big of a deal. Blah, blah,
no
blah.
one has Androids. We don't.
That's not true. Samsung is one of the biggest companies in the world.
We don't. If you have an Android, you watch us on Facebook. If you
have
anyone else in the rest of the world, listen to us on iTunes.
You have a real job in actually doing things business-wise. If you have an Apple, you're more of the creative marketing type.
What are you talking about? I'm not going into this. We should just go.
But to that note, soon enough we'll be on Google Podcasts as well, and as well as Spotify. So these things are all rolling and moving very quickly. Thanks again to Chris Licata for producing the show today. Sorry again for the technical bumps here and there, but
to find a new one.
That's right.
I thought he did a great job.
So
shout out to Matt Lettler for coming on board and giving us a.
Oh yeah, that guy who took my seat. Crashed my show.
He looked better on camera than you. Please make sure someone has a polo and product for next time.
Dude, this is Old Navy, bro. Stop hating.
I will hate.
All right, run the clip, Chris.
Hit the outro. Let's go. All right, so long, everybody.
See you guys.